September 20th, 1944. The forest of Belgium. A German Panzer IV tank commander hears something wrong. Not the roar of a P-47 Thunderbolt. Not the scream of artillery. A sputtering sound, like a lawnmower in the sky. He opens his hatch and looks up, just in time to see a tiny fabric-covered airplane diving toward him at 90 miles per hour. Mounted beneath its wings, 6 M9 bazooka tubes. The last thing he hears is the whoosh of a rocket leaving the rail. This is the story of Charles Carpenter, a mild-mannered high school history teacher from Illinois who became one of the most feared tank killers of World War II, flying a plane that wasn't even supposed to have weapons. Before the war, Charles Carpenter was everything you'd expect from a small-town Illinois teacher. He taught history at Moline High School. He had a wife, 4 kids, and a reputation for being calm, methodical, and by all accounts, a little boring. But Carpenter had a secret passion, aviation. He'd earned his private pilot's license in the 1930s. Back when flying was still a rich man's hobby, he loved the freedom of the open sky, the mechanics of flight, the precision required to land a tail dragger on a grass strip. When America entered World War II in 1941, Carpenter didn't have to enlist. He was 34 years old, too old for combat duty. He had a family, a stable career, but he volunteered anyway, not to teach the tactics of fly bombers. Carpenter wanted to be where the action was, so he joined the U.S. Army as an artillery spotter pilot, flying the L-4 Grasshopper, the military version of the Piper J3 Cub. It was a 2-seat high-wing observation plane made of fabric stretched over a steel tube frame. Top speed 85 miles per hour. Armament, none. Armor, none. His job was simple. Fly low, spot enemy positions, radio coordinates back to artillery units, and get out of there before anyone started shooting. It was a flying phone booth, and Charles Carpenter was about to turn it into a killing machine. By the summer of 1944, Carpenter had been flying reconnaissance missions over France and Belgium for months. Every day, he'd take off at dawn, fly low over German lines, mark enemy positions on his map, and call in artillery strikes. But there was a problem. By the time the coordinates were relayed, verified, and fired upon, the German tanks had already moved. Carpenter would watch from above as American infantry got pinned down by Panzers and Tiger tanks, taking casualties while waiting for support that arrived too late. It ate at him. Here he was, 500 feet above the battlefield, sometimes closer to the enemy than the ground troops, and he couldn't do a damn thing about it. Then, one afternoon in August 1944, Carpenter landed near an infantry position and watched the demonstration of the M9 bazooka. The M9 was a shoulder-fired anti-tank rocket launcher, simple, portable, and devastatingly effective at close range. It could punch through the side armor of most German tanks. But there was a catch. You had to get within 100 yards of a tank to use it. And tanks, as it turned out, were very good at killing people who got within 100 yards of them. Carpenter stared at the bazooka. Then he looked at his Piper Cub and he thought, what if I could fire that from up there? Now, let's be clear. What Carpenter was about to do was completely against regulations. The US Army had strict rules about modifying aircraft. Any weapon system had to be tested, approved, and officially sanctioned by higher command. Carpenter didn't care. With the help of a sympathetic crew chief, a mechanic named Corporal Robert Berthold, Carpenter began experimenting. They welded steel tubes beneath the wings of his L-4 Grasshopper and mounted 6 M9 bazooka launchers, 3 under each wing. The rockets were aimed slightly downward and forward, so Carpenter could fire while diving toward a target. He rigged a makeshift electrical firing system, running wires from the cockpit to each launcher, A simple toggle switch on his control stick would fire the rockets one at a time. The whole setup weighed about 100 pounds. Not much, but enough to affect the plane's already sluggish performance. On his first test flight, Carpenter flew out over an empty field, lined up on an abandoned truck, and flipped the switch. The rocket leaped off the rail with a whoosh, and the little Piper Cub lurched violently to one side from the recoil. Carpenter nearly crashed, but the rocket hit the truck dead on, tearing through the metal like tissue paper. Carpenter landed, grinning like a madman, and immediately ordered more rockets. September 20th, 1944, near the Belgian town of Bastogne. Carpenter was on a routine reconnaissance flight when he spotted a German convoy moving through a forest road. 3 Panzer IV tanks escorting a column of trucks. Most pilots would have radioed the coordinates and flown away. Carpenter armed his rockets. He circled wide, coming in from the sun so the Germans wouldn't see him until it was too late. Then he pushed the nose down and dove. At 300 feet, he fired. The first rocket streaked toward the lead Panzer, striking it just behind the turret. The tank didn't explode, not like in the movies, but smoke began pouring from the engine deck. The crew bailed out. Carpenter pulled up hard, the fabric wings groaning under the G-forces, and came around for another pass. This time, he targeted the second tank. Another hit. The German convoy scattered. Trucks careened off the road. Soldiers dove into ditches, firing their rifles uselessly at the tiny plane buzzing overhead like an angry hornet. Carpenter fired 4 more rockets, destroying 2 trucks and damaging a 3rd tank before his ammunition ran out. Then he flew home, landed, and calmly filed his after-action report. His commanding officer read it twice, looked at Carpenter and said, "You did what?" Word of Carpenter's attack spread like wildfire. At first the brass didn't believe it. A Piper Cub killing tanks? Impossible. But the evidence was undeniable. Reconnaissance photos confirmed the destroyed vehicles. Ground troops corroborated the story. And Charles Carpenter, the quiet schoolteacher from Illinois, suddenly had a new nickname, Bazooka Charlie. The army didn't officially approve his modification, but they didn't stop him either. Why? Because it worked. Over the next 6 months, Carpenter flew dozens of tank hunting missions. He didn't always destroy his targets. Sometimes the rockets only damaged them or forced crews to abandon their vehicles. But his presence alone was enough to disrupt German movements. German tank crews began to fear the sound of a small, slow aircraft engine. They knew that if they heard that sputtering noise overhead, rockets were about to rain down. Carpenter kept meticulous records. By his own count, he destroyed or damaged 14 German tanks, multiple armored vehicles, and over 60 trucks. Some historians dispute the exact numbers, fog of war, propaganda, the difficulty of confirming kills from the air. But even the most conservative estimates credit him with at least 6 confirmed tank kills. 6 tanks, destroyed by a fabric-covered airplane armed with improvised bazookas. It shouldn't have been possible. But Carpenter didn't care about what was possible. He cared about what worked. Make no mistake, what Carpenter was doing was suicidal. The L-4 Grasshopper had no armor, no ejection seat, no parachute pack. It flew low and slow, making it an easy target for machine guns, rifles, and light anti-aircraft fire. Carpenter's plane was hit multiple times. Bullets tore through the fabric fuselage, leaving holes you could stick your fist through. Once, a piece of shrapnel from a near miss tore through his cockpit, missing his head by inches. He crash-landed twice, once after engine failure, once after taking fire that severed his control cables. But he kept flying. After the war, a reporter asked him, "Weren't you afraid?" Carpenter thought for a moment, then said, "Every single time. But I kept thinking about the boys on the ground. They couldn't run. They couldn't hide. The least I could do was give them a chance. The war in Europe ended in May 1945. Charles Carpenter flew his last combat mission on May 8th, VE Day. He landed, shut down his engine, and walked away from his L-4 Grasshopper for the final time. He was awarded the Distinguished Flying Cross, the Silver Star, and multiple air medals for his actions. But to Carpenter, the medals meant less than the letters he received from infantrymen, soldiers who told him his attacks had saved their lives. He returned to Moline, Illinois, and went back to teaching high school history. He rarely talked about the war. When students asked, he'd smile and say he flew a little plane in Europe. He never mentioned the rockets. Charles Carpenter died in 1966 at the age of 59 from complications related to injuries he'd sustained during the war. His story faded into obscurity, overshadowed by the big battles, the famous generals, the celebrated aces. But in recent years, military historians have rediscovered Bazooka Charlie, recognizing him as a symbol of American ingenuity, courage, and the power of individual initiative in warfare. His improvised weapon system was never officially adopted, but the concept, using light aircraft for direct ground attack, influenced post-war military thinking. Today, armed reconnaissance drones and close air support aircraft owe a conceptual debt to Carpenter's crazy idea. He proved that in war, sometimes the best weapon isn't the biggest gun or the fastest jet. Sometimes it's just a good idea and the guts to try it. Charles Carpenter was never supposed to be a warrior. He was a teacher, a father, a man who loved flying on quiet Sunday mornings over the Illinois countryside. But when the world went to war, he didn't just do his duty. He rewrote the rules. With nothing but a fabric-covered trainer, some stolen bazookas, and an unshakable sense of right and wrong, he became one of the most effective tank killers of World War II. He wasn't a general. He wasn't a hero in the traditional sense. He was just a schoolteacher who couldn't stand watching good men die when he had the skills and the courage to do something about it. And in the end, maybe that's what heroism really is. Not following orders, not sticking to the plan, but seeing a problem, grabbing the tools you have, and refusing to give up until you've solved it, no matter how crazy the solution looks. So the next time you see a small plane flying overhead, sputtering along, slow and unassuming, remember Bazooka Charlie, and remember that sometimes the most dangerous thing on the battlefield isn't the biggest weapon. It's the person crazy enough to improvise. Charles Bazooka Charlie Carpenter, 1912 to 1966, 14 plus tank kills. Distinguished Flying Cross.